This is a business transaction. Nothing personal. It feels personal to me.
Tuesday morning, 9:47 a.m. I remember the exact time because I just refilled my coffee, third cup of the day, when the email notification pinged across my screen. The subject line made my stomach drop before I even opened it. Urgent, training assignment, confidential. My boss, Richard Castellano, wanted to see me immediately. No explanation. No context. Just that word. Confidential. I'd been at this company for 23 years. 23 years of early mornings, late nights, missed soccer games, and family dinners reheated in the microwave. I'd survived 3 recessions, 2 corporate mergers, and more restructuring initiatives than I could count. I thought I was untouchable. I thought loyalty meant something. I was wrong about everything. Because what happened next would unravel a conspiracy worth $4.7 million, expose a calculated plan that had been in motion for months, and force me to confront a truth so devastating that when I finally understood it, I couldn't speak for 2 full minutes. My name is Michael Patterson. I'm 52 years old. I have a wife, 2 kids in college, a mortgage, and until that Tuesday morning, I had a career I believed in. But my boss made me train my replacement. And the real reason why left me absolutely speechless. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened, you need to understand who I was. I started at TechFlow Industries in May of 2001, right after the dot-com bubble burst and the tech world was on fire. Everyone was scrambling. Companies were folding left and right. But I landed a position as a junior software engineer at this mid-sized data analytics firm in Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy. Nothing glamorous. Just honest work for honest pay. I was 29 years old, newly married, and hungry to prove myself. TechFlow wasn't some Silicon Valley giant. We had about 400 employees, served regional clients, and the CEO knew most of us by name. It felt like family. We had company picnics, Christmas parties with actual budgets, retirement send-offs where people cried and meant it. The kind of workplace culture you hear about but rarely experience. I loved it there. I poured everything into that job. Nights, weekends, holidays. When the company needed someone to learn a new system, I volunteered. When a project was behind schedule, I stayed until it was done. I trained 17 new employees over the years. Mentored them. Watched them grow. Some of them are still there today, probably wondering if they're next. I worked my way up slowly but steadily. Junior engineer to senior engineer. Senior engineer to lead developer. Lead developer to systems architect. By 2015, I was managing our entire client data infrastructure. Every major account ran through systems I'd built or optimized. I knew that company inside and out. The clients trusted me. My team respected me. And my boss, Richard Castellano, well, I thought he valued me. Rich joined TechFlow in 2009 as a senior manager and climbed fast. MBA from Northwestern. Always talked about efficiency, optimization, strategic positioning. He had that corporate smooth talk down to an art. We weren't friends exactly, but we were friendly. We'd grab drinks after quarterly reviews. Talk about our kids. He sent a fruit basket when my father passed away in 2022. When he got promoted to VP of Engineering in 2023, I was genuinely happy for him. I thought we were on the same team. I thought we shared the same values. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The subtle shifts. The change in tone. But when you're inside it, when you're living it day by day, you don't notice the water heating up until you're already boiling. The warning signs started in early 2024. January, to be specific. The company announced what they called a restructuring initiative. Standard corporate language. Optimization. Streamlining. Positioning for future growth. They hired an outside consulting firm called Optimax Consulting to evaluate our operations and recommend improvements. I'd seen this before. Consultants come in, shuffle some departments around, maybe cut a few redundant positions, and leave with a fat check. Business as usual. But this felt different. The consultants were everywhere. Sitting in on meetings. Interviewing department heads. Asking detailed questions about workflows, responsibilities, and personnel costs. They wanted to know everything. Who did what? How long tasks took? What institutional knowledge existed and where? One of them, a sharp-dressed woman in her 30s with a tablet that never left her hand, asked me to walk her through a typical day. I thought I was helping. I thought transparency was good. I explained my role in excruciating detail. The clients I managed. The systems I maintained. The processes I developed over 2 decades. She nodded and smiled and typed everything into her tablet. I didn't realize I was writing my own termination notice. Then came March. The company started holding mandatory seminars about retirement planning. Financial wellness workshops, they called them. Targeted specifically at employees over 50. They brought in advisors to talk about Social Security, 401k distributions, and healthcare options in retirement. It was framed as a benefit. A perk. A way to help us plan for our futures. But the subtext was clear. They were asking us to think about leaving. To consider our options. To imagine a life after TechFlow. I attended one of these sessions. Sat in a conference room with about 30 other employees, most of us in our 50s or early 60s. People who'd been there for decades. People who'd built this company. The financial advisor was polished and professional. She talked about the benefits of early retirement. The freedom. The opportunity to pursue passions. She made it sound appealing. But I noticed something. The younger employees weren't invited. This wasn't about wellness. This was about inventory. They were counting us. Calculating our costs. Figuring out how much money they could save if we disappeared. April arrived, and with it, my annual performance review. I'd always gotten good reviews. Exceeds expectations. Strong performer. Valuable team member. This year was no different on paper. Richard gave me high marks across the board. Praised my technical skills, my client relationships, my leadership. But there was something new. A section I'd never seen before. Knowledge transfer and succession planning. Richard asked detailed questions about how I documented my work. Whether I'd trained anyone on my specific systems. How difficult it would be for someone else to take over my responsibilities if I were suddenly unavailable. He framed it as disaster preparedness. What if you got hit by a bus, Mike? We need to make sure your knowledge doesn't walk out the door with you. It made sense. At least, it made sense in the moment. So I answered honestly. I told him that most of my knowledge was in my head. 2 decades of experience doesn't fit neatly into a manual. I'd trained people on pieces of the system, but no one knew everything I knew. He nodded thoughtfully. Made notes. Then he said something that should have set off alarm bells. He said, "We need to fix that. We need you to start documenting everything. Creating training materials. Building a knowledge base." I asked why the sudden urgency. He smiled and said it was just good business practice. Strategic planning. Preparing for the future. I believed him. I actually believed him. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. May 14th, 2024. That Tuesday morning, 9:47 a.m. The email that changed everything. I opened it expecting another routine request. Maybe a client issue. Maybe a system update. Instead, I found 5 short sentences that made my blood run cold. Michael, we're bringing on a high-potential junior analyst to support the engineering team. Given your extensive expertise and leadership capabilities, I'd like you to take the lead on mentoring this individual. Please prepare comprehensive documentation of all systems, processes, and client relationships under your purview. This is a priority project with an expected completion timeline of 90 days. Let's discuss first thing this afternoon. Rich. I read it 3 times. High potential junior analyst. Mentoring. Comprehensive documentation. 90 days. Every corporate euphemism I'd learned to recognize over 23 years was right there in those 5 sentences. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Companies hire new people all the time. Mentoring is normal. Documentation is best practice. This was fine. Everything was fine. I went to Richard's office at 2 p.m. He was waiting with someone from HR. That was the first real red flag. Performance discussions, sure, HR might sit in. But a mentoring assignment? Why would HR need to be there? Her name was Patricia Chin. Mid-40s. Professional. Polite. Carried a leather portfolio that stayed closed the entire meeting. She didn't say a word. Just observed. Richard started talking before I even sat down. Mike, thanks for coming. I want to discuss this training opportunity. We're really excited about bringing in fresh talent and pairing them with experienced leaders like yourself. This is about succession planning, knowledge preservation, and building bench strength for the future. He kept using phrases like that. Succession planning, bench strength, future readiness. Corporate word salad designed to obscure the truth. I asked the obvious question. Who is this person, and what role are they filling? Richard leaned back in his chair. His name is Jordan Mackenzie. Recent graduate from Ohio State. Computer science degree. Bright kid. Eager to learn. He'll be joining as an associate analyst. I waited for more. An associate analyst is entry level. My role was senior systems architect. The gap between those positions is enormous. Why would an associate analyst need to learn my job? Richard must have seen the confusion on my face because he jumped in quickly. Think of this as leadership development, Mike. We're investing in you as a mentor. This shows the trust and confidence we have in your abilities. Plus, frankly, you're the only person who understands these systems deeply enough to train someone properly. We need your knowledge captured before anything happens. Before anything happens. The phrase hung in the air. Before I retire? Before I leave? Before I die? He didn't specify. And I didn't ask. I should have asked. Patricia from HR finally spoke. She slid a document across the table. It was a training plan template. Objectives, milestones, deliverables, sign-off requirements. She explained that I'd need to document everything in writing. Create detailed process guides. Record training sessions for future reference. Provide regular progress reports to Richard and the legal department. I stopped her. The legal department? Why would legal need to be involved in a training program? She smiled that professional HR smile. The one that reveals nothing. Just standard protocol for proprietary information transfer, Michael. We want to ensure all intellectual property is properly documented and protected. This is routine for any knowledge-sharing initiative involving critical systems. It wasn't routine. I'd trained 17 people over the years. Legal had never been involved. Not once. But I nodded. I smiled. I took the document. I agreed to everything. Because what choice did I have? Say no and look uncooperative? Refuse to train someone and seem like I was hoarding knowledge? Question the process and appear difficult? So I did what I'd always done. I followed orders. I was a good soldier. I went back to my desk, opened the training plan template, and started writing my own professional obituary. Jordan Mackenzie started the following Monday. I met him in the lobby at 8 a.m. He looked like he just walked out of a college recruitment poster. 23 years old, clean-cut, wearing a button-down shirt that was just slightly too formal for our office culture. Nervous energy. Firm handshake. He had a brand-new laptop bag and a notebook already filled with questions. He seemed like a good kid. Polite. Respectful. genuinely excited to be there. That made everything harder. We sat down in a conference room, and I asked him what he knew about the role. He said Richard had told him this was a rotational program, that he'd be learning from different teams to build a broad understanding of the company's operations, that I was the first mentor in a year-long development track. A rotational program. Richard had lied to him too. Jordan wasn't rotating anywhere. He was replacing me. But he didn't know that. And I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not without proof. So I started teaching. I showed him our core systems. Walked him through client databases. Explained the architecture I'd built and maintained for 15 years. He took notes furiously. Asked smart questions. Picked things up quickly. Under different circumstances, I would have been proud to mentor someone like him. But every piece of information I shared felt like handing over ammunition. Like digging my own grave one shovelful at a time. The first 2 weeks were intensive. 8-hour days of training. I created documentation for everything. Step-by-step guides. System diagrams. Troubleshooting protocols. Client contact lists with notes about preferences and quirks. Password repositories. Access credentials. Every piece of institutional knowledge I'd accumulated over 2 decades, I poured into documents that Jordan could reference without me. Richard checked in constantly. How's it going? Is Jordan picking things up? Are you documenting everything? I'd say yes, it's going well, and he'd smile and nod and remind me that this was a priority project. That the timeline was firm. 90 days. After week 3, things got stranger. Jordan asked if he could record our training sessions. He said it would help him review the material later. I asked if that was his idea. He said no, Richard had suggested it. So I agreed. Every session was recorded. Video and audio. Saved to the company server. Accessible to Richard, HR, and apparently legal. I was performing my own replacement on camera. Creating a library of training materials that would make me completely unnecessary. But I kept going. Because I still didn't have proof. Just suspicion. Just gut feeling. And you can't fight a corporation with gut feeling. Week 5 brought a new development. I was walking Jordan through our client relationship management system when someone knocked on the conference room door. A woman I'd never met before stepped in. Tall, professional, expensive suit. She introduced herself as Jennifer Ciel, Senior Corporate Counsel. She said she was just sitting in to observe. To make sure proprietary information was being handled appropriately. I asked if there was a specific concern. She said no, just routine compliance. Then she sat down, opened a laptop, and started taking notes. For the next 3 hours, she watched and typed. Every explanation I gave. Every question Jordan asked. Every piece of information I shared. All documented by legal. This wasn't routine. This was evidence collection. They were building a file. A record that showed I had successfully transferred all my knowledge. That I was no longer essential. That the company could function without me. After that session, Jennifer asked me to sign several documents. Non-disclosure agreements. Intellectual property acknowledgement forms. Knowledge transfer attestation statements. I read through them quickly. Standard legal language about proprietary information belonging to the company. About my responsibility to protect trade secrets. About my acknowledgement that all work product was company property. I signed. I should have called a lawyer right then. I should have recognized what was happening. But I didn't. I was still operating under the assumption that I was valued. That my loyalty mattered. That 23 years of service meant something. By week 7, I'd handed over everything. Complete system documentation. Client files. Process guides. Troubleshooting playbooks. Even the shortcuts and workarounds that you can't find in any manual. The stuff you learn from experience. From fixing problems at 3 a.m. when systems crash and clients are screaming. I'd given Jordan the benefit of 2 decades of trial and error, of lessons learned the hard way, of expertise that can't be taught, only earned. Except I just taught it. In 90 days, I'd compressed 23 years of knowledge into a format that a recent college graduate could follow. I'd made myself replaceable. And I'd documented every step of the process. Richard seemed thrilled. He praised my work constantly. Told me what an incredible job I was doing. How impressed he was with my dedication. How this really demonstrated leadership and commitment to the company's future. He used the word trust 4 times in one conversation. Looking back, that's when I knew something was deeply wrong. Because when someone keeps telling you they trust you, it usually means they're planning to betray you. Week 8. Late Thursday evening. I was working past 6, finishing up some documentation. Most of the office had cleared out. The lights were dimmed. That quiet, empty feeling that office buildings get after hours. I was heading to the printer when I heard voices coming from the large conference room. The door was slightly ajar. I recognized Richard's voice. And Jennifer's, the attorney? I should have kept walking. Should have respected their privacy. But something made me stop. Made me stand in that darkened hallway and listen. Jennifer was talking. I caught fragments. Once the transition is complete, we need to ensure the documentation is airtight. If he challenges this, we need to demonstrate clear business necessity. The knowledge transfer record is essential for litigation protection. Richard responded. I understand. We've been meticulous. Every session recorded, every document signed, every milestone verified. When we make the move, there won't be any basis for an age discrimination claim. The evidence shows this was purely about succession planning and business continuity. Age discrimination claim. Those 3 words hit me like a freight train. I stood there in the dark hallway, frozen. My heart was pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Everything clicked into place. The training. The documentation. The legal oversight. The recordings. The signatures. They weren't preparing for my retirement. They were preparing to fire me. And they were building an airtight legal defense to make sure I couldn't fight back. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Couldn't think straight. My wife, Karen, knew something was wrong. I tried to explain it, but the words came out jumbled. They're going to fire me. They made me train my replacement. I've been documenting my own termination for 2 months. She didn't understand. Not really. How could she? Corporate politics, legal maneuvering, calculated workforce reduction strategies. These aren't things normal people deal with. These aren't things you expect to happen when you show up every day and do good work. But it was happening. And I'd helped them do it. I'd been complicit in my own destruction. I spent the weekend researching. Age discrimination law. The Age Discrimination in Employment Act. Corporate restructuring tactics. Forums full of people telling similar stories. 50-year-old manager forced to train a 25-year-old replacement. 55-year-old director suddenly put on a performance improvement plan after 20 years of stellar reviews. 60-year-old VP asked to take early retirement or face termination. The pattern was everywhere. And it was legal, as long as companies were careful. As long as they documented business reasons. As long as they avoided explicit age-related language. As long as they built a paper trail that showed the decision was about efficiency, not age. TechFlow had been very, very careful. Monday morning, I went back to the office with fresh eyes. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. I noticed that Jordan wasn't the only young replacement being trained. 3 other senior employees, all over 50, all with decades of experience, were also mentoring recent graduates. I started asking quiet questions. Careful questions. I reached out to colleagues I trusted. Did you notice anything odd about this training initiative? Has legal been involved in your process? Have you heard anything about restructuring? The answers were troubling. Yes, legal was involved in every case. Yes, the documentation requirements were unusually extensive. Yes, there were rumors about a consultant report recommending workforce optimization. One colleague, David, who was 56 and had been there since the company's founding, pulled me aside. He'd heard whispers. The consultants, Optimax, had delivered their recommendations in March. They'd identified significant cost savings through strategic workforce restructuring. They'd specifically flagged senior employees with high salaries and full benefits packages as opportunities for optimization. David said the word optimization with audible disgust. He tried to get more information but was shut down. Told it was confidential. Executive-level planning. Need-to-know basis. But he'd pieced together enough to be worried. Very worried. I started digging into Optimax Consulting. Their website was professional and vague. Corporates speak about driving efficiency and maximizing shareholder value. But I found something interesting in their case studies section. They'd worked with a manufacturing company in Michigan 3 years earlier. Helped them reduce operational costs by 18% through strategic workforce planning. I found news articles about that company. They'd laid off 140 employees, mostly workers over 50, and replaced them with younger, cheaper labor. There'd been a lawsuit. Age discrimination? The company had won. The court found that they'd documented legitimate business reasons for the restructuring. That they'd followed proper procedures. That the age of the affected employees was coincidental, not causal. Optimax's fingerprints were all over it. This was their specialty. Helping companies cut expensive senior workers while building legal protection against discrimination claims. And now they were doing it to us. To me. I needed proof. Hard evidence. I started going through my emails with new awareness. Every message from Richard suddenly looked different. Every request for documentation. Every mention of succession planning. Every timeline update. I created a folder and started saving everything. Then I found it. An email chain I'd been accidentally copied on back in March. It was from Optimax's lead consultant, a man named Preston Wade, to Richard and the executive team. The subject line was Workforce Optimization Recommendations Confidential. I deleted it at the time, assuming it was a mistake that I'd been included. But my company used an archival system that kept everything. I dug it out of the archives and read it with my hands shaking. The email was clinical. Brutally efficient. It identified 47 employees as high-cost, low adaptability targets for strategic separation. It recommended a phased approach. Knowledge transfer first. Documentation second. Transition period. Then termination with minimal severance tied to comprehensive release of claims. It specifically mentioned ensuring legal compliance and avoiding ADA violations. ADA. Age Discrimination in Employment Act. They were planning around it. The email included a spreadsheet. I opened it. My name was on row 17. Next to it, current salary $142,000. Replacement salary $67,000. Annual savings $75,000. Years to pension vesting 18 months. Recommended action separate before vesting. I stared at that screen for a long time. They'd reduced me to a line item. A cost to be eliminated. A problem to be solved. 23 years of loyalty, and I was worth $75,000 in annual savings to them. I checked the other names on the spreadsheet. 47 people. All over 45. Most over 50. Combined annual savings if all were replaced $4.7 million. Combined pension benefits they'd lose if terminated before vesting $11.2 million. This wasn't about efficiency. This wasn't about performance. This was about money. Pure calculation. They were eliminating everyone who'd been there long enough to earn real compensation and real benefits. Everyone who'd built this company was being systematically erased to improve the bottom line. I sat in my car in the parking lot that evening and cried. Actually cried. I'm 52 years old. I've been through divorces and funerals and failures. I don't cry easily. But this broke something in me. The betrayal wasn't just that they were going to fire me. It was that they'd made me participate. They'd made me smile and train and document and cooperate while they built the mechanism of my own destruction. They'd weaponized my professionalism against me. I contacted an employment attorney that week. Found one who specialized in age discrimination cases. His name was Robert Feldman. Late 60s, gray beard, kind eyes. He'd been doing this for 40 years. I showed him everything. The emails. The spreadsheet. The training timeline. The legal documentation. The recordings. He read through it all methodically. When he finished, he took off his reading glasses and rubbed his eyes. He said, "Michael, I'm going to be honest with you. This is textbook age discrimination. The pattern is clear. The intent is obvious. But it's also extremely well executed. They've done everything right from a legal protection standpoint. They've documented business justifications. They've created a knowledge transfer record. They've avoided any explicit age-related language. If you sue, you'll have an uphill battle." I asked him what he meant by uphill battle. He explained. Employment discrimination cases are hard to win under the best circumstances. The burden of proof is on the employee. You have to show that age was the determinant factor in the employment decision. Not just a factor. The factor. Companies know this. So they create alternative explanations. Restructuring. Efficiency. Skill set alignment. As long as they can articulate a legitimate business reason, courts generally defer to employer judgment. TechFlow had articulated many legitimate business reasons. All documented. All signed off on by legal. Robert asked if I wanted to proceed anyway. I asked what the odds were. He said honestly, maybe 20% chance of surviving summary judgment. If we made it to trial, maybe 50-50. But trials take years. Cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees. Companies know this too. They count on workers not having the resources or stamina for a long fight. Most cases settle early for nuisance value. $20,000, $30,000 and a non-disclosure agreement. Just enough to make the problem go away. I asked what he'd do in my position. He thought about it. Then he said I'd document everything. I'd wait for them to make their move. I'd see what they offer. And then I'd decide if you want to fight or move on. But Michael, you need to understand something. Even if you win, you lose. You'll be marked. Unhireable. The guy who sued his employer. Companies don't touch that. So winning a lawsuit might cost you your career anyway. It was the truth. The ugly, unfair truth. The system protects companies, not workers. And they know it. I went back to work the next day. Finished the training program. Jordan completed his 90-day transition right on schedule. He knew the systems. He had the documentation. He had access to everything. He could do my job. Not as well as I could, not with 23 years of experience and judgment. But well enough. Well enough to save the company $75,000 a year. That's all that mattered. The Friday of week 12, I got a calendar invitation. Richard, Patricia from HR, and me. 4:47 p.m. The meeting title was Transition Discussion. I knew what it was. I'd known for weeks. But seeing it in my calendar, scheduled like any other meeting, felt surreal. Like watching your own execution being planned on Outlook. I thought about not going. About calling in sick. About just walking out and never coming back. But I went. Because I needed to hear them say it. Needed to look Richard in the eye while he did what he'd been planning for months. The meeting was exactly as cold as I expected. Patricia led it. Richard mostly stayed quiet. She started with the standard script. Michael, as you know, the company has been undergoing a comprehensive restructuring initiative. After careful analysis and consultation with our operational partners, we've made the difficult decision to eliminate several positions as part of a reduction in force. Your position as senior systems architect is one of those being eliminated. This decision is in no way a reflection of your performance or your contributions to TechFlow over the years. It's purely a business decision based on organizational needs and strategic priorities moving forward. Your last day will be 2 weeks from today. We're offering a severance package contingent on your signature on a separation agreement and release of claims. She slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Severance offer 8 weeks of pay. About $22,000 before taxes. Health insurance continuation through COBRA at my expense. Return of all company property within 48 hours. And 10 pages of legal language that all boiled down to one thing: I agreed never to sue them. Never to disparage them. Never to discuss the terms of my separation. Never to contact former colleagues about my termination. I would sign away every legal right I had in exchange for 2 months of salary. I looked at Richard. He was staring at the table. Wouldn't meet my eyes. I asked him directly, "Rich, do you think this is right?" He looked up. Uncomfortable. He said, "Mike, this is a business decision. It's not personal." I laughed. Actually laughed. Not personal. You made me train my replacement for 3 months. You had me document everything I know. You recorded me. You had legal watch me. You built a case against me while pretending to value my mentorship. And it's not personal. Patricia interjected. Michael, I understand you're upset. This is never easy. But the severance offer is contingent on your acceptance within 72 hours. If you decline, the offer is withdrawn and you'll receive nothing beyond your final paycheck and accrued vacation time. I asked if I could have time to review with an attorney. She said of course, but the timeline stands. 72 hours. Sign or lose the offer. I took the folder and left without another word. I called Robert Feldman from my car. Told him what happened. Read him the severance offer. He said it was standard. Actually slightly better than some he'd seen. 8 weeks was more than the statutory minimum. But the release was comprehensive. If I signed, I'd have no legal recourse. No ability to file an EOC complaint. No ability to join any class action if one emerged. I'd be permanently silenced. He asked what I wanted to do. I didn't know. $22,000 wasn't enough to replace my income while I looked for a new job. But it was something. Fighting meant risking everything with low odds of success. And even if I won, what would I win? Reinstatement to a company that wanted me gone? A cash settlement after years of litigation and legal fees? My reputation destroyed in the industry? There was no good option. Just different flavors of loss. That weekend was the worst of my life. I told Karen everything. Showed her the severance offer. Explained the choice. Sign and take the money and move on. Or fight and risk losing everything with slim chances of victory. She asked what I wanted to do. I said I didn't know. Part of me wanted to fight. Wanted to expose what they'd done. Wanted to make them pay for the betrayal. But the practical part of me, the part that had bills to pay and kids in college, knew that fighting was a luxury I couldn't afford. We needed the severance. We needed the 2 months of breathing room while I looked for another job. We needed to be practical. But it felt like surrender. Like letting them win. On Sunday night, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the separation agreement for the 100th time, when my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Check your mailbox." No. I thought it was spam. But something made me go outside. It was nearly 11 p.m. The street was dark and quiet. I opened my mailbox and found a manila envelope. No postage. No return address. Hand-delivered. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note on plain paper. The note said, "They did this to my dad. Don't let them win. A friend." I went back inside and plugged the USB into my laptop. My hands were shaking. The drive contained files. Dozens of them. Internal emails. Consultant reports. Termination lists. Pension calculations. Communications between Richard, the executive team, and Optimax Consulting. Everything. The full scope of the plan laid out in corporate documentation. I spent 4 hours reading through it. Every file was worse than the last. There were emails discussing how to structure the separations to minimize legal risk. Memos about identifying employees close to pension vesting and prioritizing their termination. Spreadsheets calculating the return on investment of firing senior workers and replacing them with recent graduates. Consultant presentations about the best practices for age-based workforce reduction. And at the center of it all was a document titled RIF Protocol Legal Compliance Checklist. RIF stood for Reduction in Force. The checklist was a step-by-step guide to firing older workers while avoiding discrimination claims. Document performance concerns even if manufactured. Check. Create knowledge transfer paper trail. Check. Ensure business necessity justification. Check. Avoid age-related language in all communications. Check. Offer voluntary resignation with minimal severance. Check. Require comprehensive NDA for any payout. Check. They'd followed it perfectly. Every step. Every safeguard. Every tactic designed to make the termination legally defensible while destroying lives. But there was something else in those files. Something I hadn't expected. Richard's name. On a termination list. Dated for November, 6 months after mine. My boss, the man executing this plan, was also scheduled for elimination. Richard Castellano, age 54, VP of Engineering. Current salary $195,000. Replacement salary $90,000. Annual savings $105,000. Years to pension vesting 6 months. Recommended action separate before vesting. He didn't know. He was firing me, and dozens of others, following orders from executives above him. And they were planning to do the exact same thing to him. He was a tool. Disposable. Just like me. Just like all of us. I sat there staring at that document, feeling something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just profound sadness. This wasn't about Richard being a bad person. This was about a system that treated everyone as expendable. That valued short-term profit over human dignity. That rewarded betrayal and punished loyalty. Monday morning, I called Richard's cell phone. Asked to meet him privately. Off-site. He sounded surprised but agreed. We met at a coffee shop 2 miles from the office. Neutral ground. He showed up looking tired. Defensive. Probably expecting me to yell at him. To call him a traitor. Instead, I showed him the files. His face went white when he saw the termination list. When he saw his own name. He said, "This can't be right." They told me I was part of the solution. That this was about saving the company. That I'd be leading the restructured organization. I said, "They lied to you, Rich? Just like you lied to me. We're all expendable to them." He read through the documents, getting quieter with each page. Finally, he looked up and said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want the truth. I want you to admit what you did. And then I want you to help me stop them." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I have more. Documents they don't know I kept. Communications they thought I deleted. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." We spent the next 2 days compiling everything. Richard's files combined with the anonymous USB. Together, we had a comprehensive record. Emails. Consultant reports. Financial projections. Termination schedules. Pension calculations. Legal strategy memos. Everything needed to prove systematic age discrimination. We contacted Robert Feldman together. Showed him the full scope. His eyes got wider with each document. When he finished, he said, "This is the most well-documented case of age discrimination I've seen in 40 years. You have them. But you need to understand what happens if you do this. They'll fight. Hard. They'll spend millions on defense. They'll try to destroy your credibility. They'll make it ugly." I asked if we could win. he said, with this evidence, yes. I'd give it 75% odds of surviving summary judgment. 80% at trial. This is strong. Really strong. Richard asked what would happen to the company. Robert said probably a settlement. Maybe court-ordered reforms. Possibly executive terminations. Definitely bad press. Richard looked at me. He said, I destroyed your career? I did it knowingly. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to make it right. I nodded. I said, let's burn it down. We reached out to the other employees on the termination list. 47 people total. Some had already been fired. Some were in the training phase like I'd been. Some didn't know they were targeted yet. We formed a group. Shared the evidence. 34 people agreed to join a potential class action lawsuit. 13 declined, too scared of retaliation or too exhausted to fight. I understood. We filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Provided the full documentation package. The EOC investigated for 6 weeks. On November 3rd, they issued a determination. Reasonable cause to believe TechFlow Industries engaged in systemic age discrimination in violation of the ADA. They offered mediation. TechFlow declined. So we sued. Patterson et al. Versus TechFlow Industries, Incorporated. Filed in federal court, Southern District of Ohio. 34 plaintiffs. Claiming age discrimination, wrongful termination, and violation of ERISA for pension interference. We had the evidence. We had the timeline. We had the internal documents showing intent. The media picked it up within days. Local news first. Then regional. Then national. Major tech firm accused of systematic age discrimination. The stock price dropped 14% in 2 days. TechFlow issued a statement. Corporate boilerplate. We take these allegations seriously. We're committed to a diverse and inclusive workplace. We believe our employment practices are lawful and will vigorously defend against these claims. Vigorously defend. That's corporate speak for we're going to war. And they did. They hired one of the largest employment defense firms in the country. Filed motions to dismiss. Challenged our standing. Argued business necessity. Claimed the terminations were based on legitimate restructuring needs, not age. They presented org charts. Financial projections. Market analysis. Consultant reports, edited versions. They argued that the decision to eliminate positions was driven by changing technology needs and market pressures. That the affected employees happened to be older was coincidental correlation, not causation. Our attorneys countered with the internal documents. The spreadsheets calculating savings by replacing older workers with younger ones. The consultant emails explicitly discussing age-based workforce reduction. The pension vesting timelines showing targeted terminations. The legal compliance checklists designed to avoid discrimination claims while doing exactly that. The RIF protocol that was essentially a how-to guide for age discrimination. The case dragged on for 14 months. Depositions. Discovery. Motions. Endless legal maneuvering. TechFlow spent millions on defense. We spent everything we had on offense. The legal bills were crushing. Even with Robert working on contingency, the costs of litigation are enormous. Expert witnesses. Document review. Court fees. Some plaintiffs dropped out, unable to sustain the fight. We were down to 27 by the time settlement talks began. TechFlow's board finally intervened. The legal costs were mounting. The PR damage was significant. Clients were asking questions. Employees were demoralized. The risk of going to trial and losing was too high. They made an offer. $8.9 million. Divided among the remaining 27 plaintiffs. Plus an agreement to implement third-party oversight of employment practices for 5 years. Plus a commitment to diversity and age inclusion training. Plus reinstatement offers for anyone who wanted to return. None of us wanted to return. The settlement averaged about $330,000 per plaintiff before legal fees. After fees, about $260,000 each. It sounds like a lot. It's not. Not when you've lost your career, your pension trajectory, your health insurance, and 2 years of your life fighting. I took the settlement. We all did. Because fighting to trial meant another year, maybe 2. More costs. More stress. More uncertainty. And even if we won at trial, appeals could drag on for years. The company could file for bankruptcy. We could end up with nothing. A guaranteed $260,000 now was better than a theoretical bigger payout later. The settlement included one thing that mattered more than money. A statement. Not an admission of guilt. They'd never admit guilt. But an acknowledgement. TechFlow Industries acknowledges that certain employment practices implemented during the restructuring period of 2024 may not have adequately considered the impact on longer-tenured employees. We commit to ensuring that future employment decisions are made without regard to age and that all employees are valued for their experience and contributions. It was corporate speak, carefully worded by lawyers. But it was something. An acknowledgement that what they did was wrong, even if they wouldn't say it directly. The settlement was finalized in January of 2026. Almost 2 years after that Tuesday morning email. Almost 2 years since my world collapsed. Where am I now? I'm 54. I took the settlement money and used it to bridge to Social Security eligibility. I do freelance consulting. Small projects. Contract work. Nothing permanent. Nothing with benefits. Companies are hesitant to hire someone who sued their last employer, even if I was right. Even if I won. I'm marked. Richard Castellano was terminated 3 weeks after we filed the lawsuit. They claimed it was unrelated. Part of ongoing restructuring. They offered him a severance package with the same comprehensive NDA I'd been offered. He didn't sign. He testified in our case. Gave depositions. Provided documents. He's unemployed now too. Also doing consulting. We talk occasionally. There's no friendship there. Too much damage. But there's mutual respect. 2 men who learned the same hard lesson. Jordan McKenzie, my replacement, left TechFlow 8 months after I was fired. He said he couldn't stomach working for a company that did what they did. He felt used. Manipulated. He reached out to apologize. I told him he had nothing to apologize for. He was a kid who took a job. He didn't know he was a weapon. TechFlow Industries is still operating. Rebranded slightly. New PR campaign emphasizing values and culture. Hired a new chief diversity officer. The CEO who oversaw the restructuring retired with a generous compensation package. No accountability. No consequences for him. Business as usual. Optimax Consulting changed their name. They're now called Strategic Workforce Solutions. Same services. Same tactics. Different branding. They're still helping companies eliminate expensive older workers while building legal protection. Still getting paid millions to optimize workforces by destroying lives. The system that enabled all of this hasn't changed. Age discrimination is still happening. Every day. In every industry. To people just like me. People who worked hard. Who were loyal. Who believed the unspoken contract that if you do good work, you'll be taken care of. That contract doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it never did. Companies are not families. They're not communities. They're economic entities optimized for profit. And when you become more expensive than you're worth, you're eliminated. Efficiently. Legally. With comprehensive documentation to protect against lawsuits. The lesson I learned, the one I wish I'd known 23 years ago, is this. Your loyalty to a company will never be reciprocated. You are always expendable. The moment the calculation shifts, the moment replacing you saves money, you're gone. No matter how long you've been there. No matter how good your work is. No matter how much you've sacrificed. You're a line item on a spreadsheet. And spreadsheets don't care about loyalty. So here's what I want to know. If your boss asked you to train your replacement tomorrow, would you see it coming? Would you recognize the signs I missed? Would you document everything and prepare for the fight? Or would you do what I did, trust the system, believe in loyalty, and cooperate in your own destruction? Have you experienced this? Have you watched it happen to someone you know? Are you watching it happen right now? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Share your story. Because silence is how they win. Silence is how companies keep doing this to people who don't see it coming. The more we talk about it, the harder it becomes for them to operate in the shadows. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Because these stories need to be told. Companies need to know we're watching. And workers need to know they're not alone. The person sitting next to you might be training their replacement right now. And they don't even know it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, your career is not your family. Your employer is not your friend. Protect yourself. Document everything. And never, ever assume that loyalty will be rewarded. Because I learned the hard way. It won't.